Yeah, let's not record in 4K if I don't have to. It is time to talk STPR. I kind of like to think of this as my home event, even though it's 4 hours away from home. I only work an hour away, and I've been to Wellsboro many times even before I got into Raleigh, so it's kind of a familiar spot for me. In fact, I actually really like it as a town. The people really come out and seem to enjoy the rally, and it's just a really cute little town and everything. I'm sure my ex-wife would be quick to tell you how much I like the gas lighting. But it is an event. Now it's an Eastern Regional event. It used to be a national event. In fact, actually, the first time I went to it, got to watch all the national folks drive by. But now I'm competing. Getting up there was less of an issue than it was last year. Well, I'm running pretty far ahead of schedule, so since I can't check into the Airbnb for another couple hours, I pulled off at this very familiar trailer parking, which is where I blew the tire last year. And as you can see, I have no blown tires, but I did check on the car, made sure that it's tight, and this is the tightest it's ever been with the new straps. I took out the multimeter and figured out whether I could figure out why I no longer have the ceiling 12-volt lighting working. And it turns out it's because I'm having like a 10-volt drop in the pigtail. I have 12 volts at the 7-pin connector on the truck, but I'm only getting 2 at the other end of it. So I guess I need a new pigtail. That was really the main thing that I kind of worked on. However, when I was looking at the truck, at the car, I did discover a wing nut, and I thought that was really odd because I'm like, I don't use something this insecure on the car. We know that's going to vibrate right off. Why is there a wing nut sitting here? And it turns out that the answer is the spare tire is held in by a wing nut, which apparently I need a lock nut or a jam nut or something to go with it. So I made it to Wellsboro. They don't have a testing stage, and it's not like we would actually bother to do it in the Focus anyway, because that's my car. I know that. I don't really need a testing stage. I'm not changing the setup all of a sudden. However, setting up for it was kind of a last-minute thing. I really didn't know if the car was going to be running until basically... Actually, I fired it up on the Saturday before STPR, now that I think about it. The time for a partial refund expired Friday night. So I was kind of making a $800 bet that I was going to get the thing running on Saturday, but I did. So I got the car running, got all of the underbody protection onto it, and packed the trailer on Sunday and left for work Monday morning. Worked Monday night, Tuesday night, and headed over towards Wellsboro. With the very late decision, it wasn't like we could call on our usual sources of mechanical assistance, and I really thought for a couple of days there that it was going to be just me and Phil and maybe my girlfriend. But we kind of didn't have our usual sources to call upon that late. Chris, who we've had with us in the past with the team, had already signed up as a volunteer and was actually stage captain, so good for him. I'm sure he had fun, but unfortunately that meant that we weren't going to get him. At the last minute, I did fire off a message to the, well, I guess now technically ex-president of the University of Northwestern Ohio Rally Club, and they did get us at the very last minute, Braden, who turned out to be very helpful, actually, very enthusiastic, young guy, and in the middle of their program, and worked hard, did his stuff. I have nothing but good things to say about that program. So Phil and I showed up Wednesday night, as kind of expected. Thursday we signed in, and then Thursday we headed out for recce. Recce was limited to 1 day, which was going to have to be kind of a full day. We decided to meet Braden at the tech inspection. He headed over there before we did, because we were running a little bit behind, and I thought we would kind of be finished with the stage before we actually were. Got a call from him, a text from him saying, hey, call me. So when we finally got back into service range, gave him a call, and it turns out that the post on the top of the rear left shock had completely snapped right off. Nothing that failed tech inspection, because that's not on their list of things to check. The negative post they wanted covered up in the engine bay, so we simply electrical taped that together, because who cares if the ground goes to ground? It's not going to spark or cause any problems, not like that red cable sitting out. Fortunately, the red cable was under the plastic box, and we had no problems with that. Thursday night was a super special. They've been apparently running the fairgrounds stage for many, many years, and then kind of stopped for a number of years, so I'd never gotten to experience that before, but we got to do the super special on Thursday night. That was an interesting kind of thing, because you're not allowed to drive it for recce, which means that I ended up doing recce on foot. It's kind of a bizarre experience. It turns out that when you're walking, your eye tends to deeply overestimate the distances. I was kind of making notes on my phone, and I would stand there and kind of like, okay, all right, this looks like about 100. Okay, all right, 100. And then I would pace it out, just out of curiosity to see how accurate I was. And, I would walk and discover that I had just walked 70 yards instead of 100. And that was pretty consistent. I actually did one pass just kind of making my own notes, and then Phil showed up finally. He was a few minutes behind me. And then he followed with me, and he's like, it looks like about 100. I'm like, oh no, I paced this off. This is legitimately 70. So that was kind of a surprise to discover that just standing up a little bit higher was enough to throw off my distance estimations that much. In any case, we made it to the park expose that night. I had the car ready to go. We did swap out the rear suspension. That's the easy suspension to swap out, and about 20 minutes aside, bolt up top, bolt at the bottom, and boom, you're done. The hardest part is making sure that you jack it up to just the right angle to make the bolt easier to get in. Not challenging at all. So we had... Yes, and this should sound familiar to those of you who remember the Overmountain episode. We had our orange stock conies in back. Figured what could go wrong. I still had 4 stock spares from the auto parts store in the back of the trailer. No big deal. We could just switch. The switcher starts at every service and still be fine. So we started the super special there at the fairgrounds. I guess it's kind of emblematic of everything else that went wrong, that apparently when I plugged the voice recorder into the intercom system, I must not have plugged it in all the way, or something didn't go right, because it continued to record out of the microphones rather than out of the intercom system, so I don't actually have our calls and our conversation, which was a little disappointing. It was such a shitty event for us that we were really putting the TP in STPR. So we ended up stalled on stage. Phil initially suggested that perhaps it was the transmission cable linkage again, but I could move the transmission cable and it went into gear. It wasn't loose like it was that time that the cable fell off. So I knew something was wrong deeper, and I was really worried that it was the transmission, because remember, this is a spare transmission that I had never run before, because my main transmission with the LSD is off of the transmission guy, getting reinforced so that it wouldn't break. However, once we started getting towed, we heard this clunking sound, and Phil suggested maybe we broke another axle. And sure enough, when we looked under the car, we had blown the passenger side half shaft. At this point, the half shaft is, I hate to call it an easy repair, but I've done it a couple of times, and we were able to do it in under an hour. I set out the string of lights that was intended for the trailer, or rather for the pop-up tent. It provided tons and tons of light. It was the first time I'd used that. I figured I spent money on it. I may as well use it at some point for something. And in addition to being quite useful, it actually generated some really dramatic photography. I was really proud of that. Completely accidentally. That was definitely not the purpose of the lighting. We just wanted to see what the hell we were doing. But we were able to get the half shaft swapped out without even having to drop the skid plate. It might have taken, 10 less minutes if we'd bothered to drop the skid plate, because it would have been easier to reach the little clamp that hangs on the back of the engine and keeps the one bearing in place. But to be perfectly fair, it was perfectly adequate. And actually, I think Braden did most of the work. I just kind of directed him and handed him tools, because at that point I'd done it recently enough that I'm like, okay, so that one's a 15 and the other one's going to be a 13, probably a deep well, and so on. We started Friday, day 2 of the rally, very much proud of ourselves for having repaired the car so quickly and efficiently, and having managed to get a full night's sleep despite that. The first task was to head to service, and we did not consider it an omen that I had to brake twice for deer before even making it all the way down to US 6. We pulled into Galton service and set up everything ready to go for the next day. And I was very proud of myself for remembering to set up a time lapse on the roof of the truck of service being set up. I was very much not proud of myself for forgetting the camera up there. And it turns out that I would find it on the roof later that day, having fallen over, but staying more or less right in place despite several miles of driving. Made it out of Park Expose, made it on transit, and a few miles into transit, heard a clunk. I don't know that I had the engine above 3,000 RPM, which makes it really disappointing that we broke that half shaft again. However, in terms of, well, things could always be worse. I mean, we didn't get stranded out on stage. We didn't have to get flat towed, unlike the previous night, which is, a position that we are well used to. We were able to just kind of roll the car backwards down the hill, and there's a gigantic stretch of tarmac kind of as a shoulder there that was really convenient for for us to pull the trailer up to. And we were even close enough to US 6 that we had cell service to call the trailer in the first place. So I hate to break down in any situation, but if I had to break down, that was really the least unpleasant way to do it. The folks in the 19th century farmhouse were actually home, and they let us sit on their porch under the shade. So when you break 2 half shafts in the span of, maybe 10 miles, something like that, and one of them wasn't even on competition miles, it was literally just trying to start up the hill from a stop sign, you start thinking, okay, there's something else going on here. There's some reason to break things. So me, Braden, and Phil started putting our heads together. I involved Mike, our mechanic from Straight and Clear, by telephone and text. And he's like, did you change anything out at the knuckle or the A-arm or ball joint or anything? And No, it was all stuff I'd run last year, and finally, eventually, I come up with the fact that I had made that aftermarket dog bone mount. And we started centering on that as the cause of our woes. Phil had already called one of the chain auto parts stores, and they said they would be able to get us a half shaft overnighted to us, and they'd have it ready when the store opened at 7:30 in the morning. So I figured I'd probably have to call. This was approaching 4 o'clock. I wasn't sure what the deadline was to get a part overnight, but I figured we'd better call and see if we can get a dog bone mount. Actually, first I stopped by the trailer to see, because I had a box that was labeled engine mounts, and I was about 98% certain that I had one of the rear roll restrictor dog bones in there. And I opened it up, and there are 3 mounts to the engine. There's the driver and passenger side top mounts, and then there's the roll restrictor kind of in the back rear part of the engine. I opened that box up and found 3 engine mounts. I found one passenger side top mount and 2 driver side top mounts. That was extremely disappointing. So I called the same auto parts store that Phil had called to see if they had a rear dog bone mount. They had one in stock. The Focus has not been made since 2011, and they probably had to blow the dust off that thing. There's no way that thing wasn't sitting there for the last 14 years, just collecting dust, had it sitting there in case somebody wanted it, and there's no sense in sending it back to the warehouse. I had that thing in my hands before 6 p.m. So we were ready to go. We figured our plan was to take everything apart, so that, start before 7:30 so that we could pop the half shaft out, get the dog bones started, and maybe only just have to pop the half shaft in when the store opened up at 7:30. My girlfriend was willing to run to the store, so we started working on the car, dropped the skid plate, pulled the half shaft out, tried starting the dog bone mount, and we were having so much trouble getting it in, because it turned out that the mount where it goes, apparently I need to back up here. No, I don't need to back up. I'll explain this in a moment. So apparently the mount that I had fashioned out of plastic was so soft that the mount for the dog bone had actually bent a little bit, and we couldn't get the dog bone in there. It was too tight. So we tried multiple ways of opening that up, and the one that finally worked was screwing the bolt into place, because there's a captive nut up top, and then jacking just the bolt up to spread that wider. We finally got the dog bone mount in place. The half shaft we'd already done. This is Braden's second one in 24 hours, and he was on top of that. We had that part was easy. Had that ready to go. Nevertheless, because of the issues with the dog bone mount, we were having some problems and running severely far behind. The tech official for STPR just randomly happened to stop through the service park and saw us working and cleared us to go from the service park. We left at like 9:20, and we're supposed to be checked into the park expose by 9:30. We rolled up at 9:31, and they simply let us through, which was fine, and I'm not going to complain about that one bit. It was only after we had parked at the park expose that we realized that the engine mount that I had fashioned, the rear roll restrictor, I decided that the stock one, being metal, wasn't allowing enough up and down movement. So I made that thing out of plastic, which is part of the build videos that you haven't seen yet at this point. It was giving too much movement and actually allowed the bolt to rip through the front of it, and the engine mount was the engine was actually swinging so far forward that it smacked into the back side of the radiator. Did not leak a single ounce of fluid. At this point, we will take our victories where we can get them. Actually, in the competition half mile that we did run, we didn't get any overheating. In the transit miles that we didn't get any overheating. So apparently replacing the thermostat has successfully fixed that. And I have an extra radiator, but I didn't bring it along. So if I had needed to fix that Saturday morning, we would have just had to bag it and call it a day. But since it wasn't leaking, we decided to proceed, even though it looked ugly. So we proceeded to line up for the ceremonial start in downtown Wellsboro there. At one point, the engine stumbled very briefly. When we stop, I'll have to check and see if that vacuum line came loose. I looked at it earlier and I thought it looked okay. But that's the kind of thing it does when it does that. Okay. I was a little worried, but it didn't happen again, so we weren't bothered at all. I deliberately gave it a little extra gas to see if I could maybe break the half shaft right there in Wellsboro where it would be convenient because it's level, there's trees on the main drag, and plenty of people to push us off to the side and plenty of room to push us off to the side. I had to break down. Right there was the perfect place to break down. Our trailer was, 15 minutes away. We made it out of Wellsboro. Turned off a US 6, started driving down the back roads to get us to the first stage of the day. At which point, so the gauge cluster has 3 permanently lit warning lights. The ABS one, or the brake one, the traction control one, and the door jar one. These are all permanently lit because I have clipped all of those various sensors, the ABS sensor, the wheel speed sensor, the door jar sensors, because, those weigh 20 grams and you gotta get rid of them. They flickered. Just went out briefly and came back on. And then they started flickering more often after, maybe a minute, maybe after 30 seconds, maybe after 20 seconds. When one of them came back on, at some point, the right turn signal indicator came on and stayed on. These are symptoms of a ground problem. I've had this happen before when I neglected to connect the top ground kind of at the back engine lifting eye. That was connected. It was intact. I checked it later. I had checked it when we plugged it in. This would have happened much sooner. We already had 10 miles, 10 problem-free miles with the first transit, plus half a competition mile. And it didn't worry us until the engine started stumbling. That actually slowed us down. It stumbled once. We weren't too put out, but definitely started having bad feelings. Once it stumbled a second time, we're like, you know what? We cannot race like this. And I said, well, it's running well enough that I think I can spin it around and kind of limp it back to service. I tried limping it back to service. It was very disappointing to watch, the half a dozen cars behind us going towards competition while we're going back to service because the car's not running right. It would sometimes falter. We had it stop, actually just outright shut down, and then I took the car to gear and it fired back up, which didn't make any sense. Finally, it came to rest maybe half a mile before Route 6. I was able to coast it into some shade, so at least we had shade. We were close enough to US 6 that, again, we had cell service. And conveniently, there, even though we were pointed in a way that if the trailer had come directly off of Route 6 that would have been pointing the wrong direction, but there was an alternate road that Braden was able to bring the trailer down and even point it the right way. So once again, we were stuck by the side of the road, twiddling our thumbs for a bit. There was actually enough of a downhill that we were able to just really easily get the car into the trailer. And at this point, that was going to be more than I wanted to deal with. We maybe could have tried troubleshooting it before the afternoon service, but at this point, it was just... Would it have been fixed to our satisfaction that it wasn't going to go bad again? And I think the answer there is no. So on the whole, definitely not the opposite of successful there. The two half shafts I take responsibility for, because it's terrible, because every time I had a mechanical person nearby, Mike, the guys from Argonaut, any professional mechanic that I talked about my theory with the plastic roll restrictor, everybody kind of validated my theory. It's just, in practice, it did not work out as well as it could have. So the axles, I completely admit, are my fault. But now I've got to go tear the car apart and figure out where the ground was. What changed from the first 2 days to the third day. Did we bump something? Did we accidentally unplug something when we were putting the half shaft in the second time? We shouldn't have. There's really nothing back there where we were working that we could have bumped. We did have to loosen up the top engine mounts to get the roll restrictor in, but only by half a dozen threads. We're talking, half an inch, something like that. Not an impressive amount of drop that we would have popped off one of the grounds and broken it like I did that one time. On the whole, very frustrating experience, and after the first two axles, I was frustrated enough that I'm like, do I really want to continue running the Focus when I know I have this Fiesta coming? And as we were sitting by the side of the road on the third day, feels like, you may want to consider not running the Focus anymore. I'm like, I'm ahead of you on this. So stay tuned. We'll see if I get the Focus up and running, or if I just decide to bag it until we have that Fiesta up and running. Until then, we'll be hanging out here trying to fix shit. See you in a bit. Okay. Am I in focus? I think I'm in focus. Focus.